Welcome back to Firebox Print Studio. In this video we're finally going to get an impression off our block, and I'm going to show you how to print it by hand. So if you don't have a press like this one, I'm going to show you how you can still get an impression, and with a bit of elbow grease the impression can be just as good as if it came off a press like this one. To start off with, we're going to need our block fully inked, the paper that we prepared earlier, a couple of hand tools to apply the pressure, a spoon will do, or a barren. I'll show you these a little later on in the video. And we'll also need a little bit of baking paper. If you remember back to the video on paper, I was talking about papers which come in different weights. With hand printing, we're after a paper which is fairly lightweight. The lighter it is, the easier it will be to transfer the ink from the block onto the paper. Because the thicker it is, the more pressure we're going to have to use. Now washi paper is great for hand printing because it is so light, but you can also get some lightweight rag papers which work just as well. Now this next step is not essential, but it might be something you might want to try, and that is dampening your paper. When you dampen your paper, it makes it a little bit softer and more supple, and it's easy to transfer the ink from the block to the paper. To dampen the paper, I like to evenly and lightly mist both the front and back of the sheets with some water, and then I like to envelop it in a plastic sheet. This will allow the moisture time to absorb through the fibres. Now I'd normally do this at least an hour or two before I'm going to start printing. Then when you're ready to print, simply take the dampened sheet out of the plastic and blot it off in between some dry paper, because you want the paper damp, not wet, and then the paper's ready to use. Once your paper's ready, your block's fully inked, you're ready to print. So take your block and put it down on a nice sturdy flat surface. Then to position your paper, holding one end up, position one corner of the paper against the registration tabs, and once the paper is lined up to those three tabs, you can slowly lay the paper down onto the ink block. Once the paper's down on the ink block, just a light rub on the back to make sure it's in position. Then I like to cover the paper and ink block with the baking paper. Now the baking paper is going to act as a barrier between our barren or our spoon, which we're going to rub on the back of the paper. It's just to protect the paper so the friction doesn't damage the back of the paper. To apply the pressure to the back of the sheet, we're going to start off by using a barren. A barren is essentially a disc with one flat surface and a handle on the other side, and it kind of distributes the pressure from our hand onto the back of the sheet. Now traditionally the barren was made of like bamboo, but it comes in all different types of materials now. And I'd recommend experimenting with different barrens to find which one works best for you. To operate your barren, just place the flat surface down onto the back of the block or the print, and then applying the pressure, I like to work it in a small circular motion all over the back of the block. Now, there's actually some quite wonderful effects you can get with the barren. You don't have to use it just like that. That's probably the simplest approach to it. If you want to try building up different textures with the barren by using the different edges of the barren, have a play with it and experiment. But if you're after just a straight conventional print, just place it straight down, small circular motion, and just make sure you cover the entire block. When I'm hand printing or burnishing by hand with the barren, I actually like to cover the block a couple of times. But before I peel the paper all the way off, it actually pays to check to see how well the ink's transferred from the block to the paper. So what you do is just anchor one side of the paper down to make sure it doesn't come all the way off, and just with the opposing side, just lift it a little, peel it back, stick your nose under and have a look at how well the ink's transferred onto your paper. If it's not fully transferred, just simply lay the paper back down again and burnish those areas which still require a little bit more ink to transfer. Now if you don't have a barren, a spoon, a glass jar, anything that's flat, solid and smooth, which will distribute the pressure, work quite well. And you approach it in exactly the same way as you do when you use a barren. Look, because it's a relief print, you don't need to exert as much pressure as you would, say, with an intaglio print, etching or engraving. So what you use to exert your pressure, whatever comes to hand and works for you is great. And look, I've seen some fantastic work whose dimensions, measure in meters, not centimeters, and they were simply printed using the person's body weight, where they just walked on the back of the paper and repeated that backwards and forwards over the back of the block. So don't feel like you're limited if you don't have special equipment like a press or barren or all that. Experiment and have a play. But in the next video, I'm going to show you how to use the printing press. So until then, happy printing, and I'll see you next time.